Welcome to another episode of Cyrus's podcast. Today we have Erin Ashley Simon. She is a internet personality, a host, a producer, a consultant, a oh my gosh, you are amazing, right? So when MCB put us in touch and he said, "Hey, look, this is somebody," I was like, "All right, let me do my research." I was like, "Wow, like I'm so impressed." So it's so good to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and also really appreciate your kind words too.
Yeah, yeah, no, as I was going through, some of the companies that you've worked with, Puma, Turtle Beach, Bacardi, I mean, AT&T, General Motors,
hmm
Nike, I mean, all of these, it's like, wow. So but what I want to go before I even get into all of that,
hmm
what I really am curious about is before working with these brands, before what you're doing now, like, did you always see that you were going to be doing what you do?
No, after it's so funny when I talk to people about my career path. They're like, "Did you always want to do something in gaming?" And I was like, "No," because I never really thought that there was even a potential career opportunity in this space. And then on top of it too, I myself did not expect to be on camera. I was used to working behind the scenes, and it was just kind of a moment of, right time at the right place with the right people. And that's how it all started. It's funny because when I was younger, I actually wanted to be a physical therapist. So it's
Oh,
completely a different
wow.
direction. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So wait, so did you end up going to school to become a physical therapist, or was it like that was what you wanted to do from when you were young, or
So
and
my
why?
my
I'm just
freshman year, I went for kinesiology.
okay.
Then I got into doing a lot of media work, and I was just very interested, and I really enjoyed telling other people's stories. And it was from there that I was like, oh, I really like this. And so when I transferred from Rutgers University to the University of Kentucky, they had a journalism program. Rutgers didn't have one. They had more like a communications major, while Kentucky had journalism. So I made that switch come my sophomore year once I switched colleges. So, but before then, it was like PT, and like I even interned at a hospital gym and did all the even
Oh,
did the
wow.
PT thing. And then after, like, I just fell in love with storytelling and telling other people's stories, and I just complete 180 my sophomore year.
That's so cool. So now, was it because you played sports and like what made you want to go into kinesiology in the first place?
I was just always fascinated with the human body and how people are, how they move. And also with me being a former soccer player, I ended up playing soccer in D1. I had so many injuries. It's so bad. I had so many injuries that I could properly like scientifically explain what the problem was with me to PTs, and especially new ones or like trainers. And they were always so shocked. They're like, wow, you know so much. I was like, yeah, I had so many injuries. I know like all the body parts that are like in that area, and like what my issues are. And so that was kind of like how I was, gain interest in that side of things. It was
Yeah,
just from my overall experience being an athlete.
that's so cool. And that's kind of why I wanted to ask that question because usually people that are interested in doing something like that were athletes before, right?
Yeah.
And and then I had an interesting conversation actually earlier today with one of the USC women's soccer players, and she was like stressing out because she was like, I don't know what I want to do after when I graduate. Because I asked them what is she majoring in, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
She was like, yeah, but I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I was like, you don't need to know. And she's like, yeah, but like, I have friends that have internships and I have this and this. And I'm like, you're a sophomore. Like, you don't need to know what you're gonna do. And I think that's such a powerful thing about your story specifically is like you thought you knew what you were gonna do. And then you were like, wait a second, I really enjoy this. Right. So talk to me about
Yeah.
that like transition and like mentally how that happened for you.
It's so funny. I was very, very lucky with the parents I have where my mom told me from the get-go, she was like, what you think you want to do? Like this was during high school. She said, what you think you want to do now, it's not probably what you end up doing several years from now. And like, so I always had that mindset where I didn't have to, I knew as a young person, like I didn't have to figure everything out. I
Yeah.
know that there's so much pressure on like kids, especially now because of social media, they think that they have to figure everything out like by their sophomore year of college. While me, I was just more so interested in like trying things out. And so when I went to school for journalism, I at the same time I was playing soccer, I interned at the Wall Street Journal. And that experience ended up with a writing job opportunity with them right after college. And it was then that I was just like, I don't really want to do this. So then I pivoted. And then eventually I got into working into like digital and the TV space and within the music world. And then eventually I was like, this is like, I like it, but like, this is not quite it. And I just pivoted and pivoted. And then it was like 2018. I got laid off by this company and I just got so tired of like working for these companies. And because I was so young, sometimes I didn't get the credit that I've earned. And I was just like, you know what? I don't want to do any of this. I want to go for like what I'm interested in. Like what do I love? What do I interact with every single day? And that's when I was like, I came to the conclusion. I was like, video games. Like I've always, no matter what happened in my career, I was always dealing with video games. And so I was like, oh, I don't know if there's even a path to that, but whatever, I'm going to figure it out. So it was like, I was always someone who wasn't afraid of trying because I realized my 20s are about trying and seeing and determining if I like it or not, and not really worrying about where everyone else is in their life and their careers because I've never really worried about that. I was always so focused on my goals and like where I want to go and what I want to do, and I was so passionate about that like I was never like comparing myself to like kids I grew up with and stuff. So I eventually got to that point, and then once I started doing stuff in gaming, I was like, oh yeah, I like this, I like this. But the funny thing is, like, now that I'm in the gaming space and I've accomplished a lot, I'm like, okay, I want to do more. It's always like
Yeah.
the next level. Okay, what are we doing next? What are we doing next? So I've always been like that.
So interesting. So, and I'm gonna go back because you had mentioned your mom had said like you're probably not gonna do what you think you're gonna do,
Mm-hmm.
right? So do you think that that mindset of like trying was empowered by your mom, or where did you get that thought process that it was okay to just try things?
Yeah. So it was a combination of my mom and then it was a combination of myself. So my mom was always the person who at first she would say, hey, you got to try stuff to see what you like. But then once you know what you like, you got to stick to it. So like when I did soccer and I ran track, I played basketball and I was like, I really love soccer. She's like, all right, now you need to solely focus on that and be considered one of the best at that. So, it was that plus I I was never someone who like took no's hard. I was always that person. I was like, oh, you just mean not right now? Okay, cool. So because like when I wanted to get into broadcasting work, I had so many people that are like, oh, you don't fit the image, blah, 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 this and that. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, you'll come back sooner or later. And I've always
Yeah,
had that very mindset. I feel like the competitiveness from my soccer days is like what still sticks with me when it comes to trying. Like I'm not afraid to try. I'm not afraid to fail. I'm not afraid for someone to say no to me. Like I've always been like, I'm going to work hard and I'm going to figure it out. And so that, my mom being someone like she says she wanted to raise me and my brother like as renaissance kids where it's like we're good at, we try multiple things. We have an interest in multiple things. But it was also my competitiveness that really pushed me. It was that to try new things, but then also the fact that like at the time, for example, when even like 10 years ago, I didn't feel like there was the representation was there. I didn't have anyone that I could look up to in the gaming space in certain areas of entertainment. And then that also fueled me to be that representation for people that I wish I had too. So it's a combination of all three things that I think what really inspired and pushed me to try things and not be afraid of failing.
that's cool. Yeah, I think it's super important for people to hear that, because I think there's a lot of people that are in the same shoes that you were in at one point, and it's important to see that, like, hey, like, if you go, you don't need to know exactly what you're going to do, but just do something that you enjoy and then lean into it and then go all in, right? Like, I think that's such an important lesson for anybody to really understand. Now, you are a part owner of XSET, right? Um, Obviously, you've hinted at it multiple times in this conversation about gaming, gaming, gaming. So talk to me about how that even came about. Like, how did you get into the esports world?
Another thing of it just happened. I started covering, a big props to my friend. He got me involved from a writing perspective, covering the intersection of culture, gaming, entertainment, gaming. And so I started covering it, and then eventually the NBA had an esports league that they put together, and it was the beginning of it. I covered it, and eventually they needed someone to host a show for them for the esports league, and I said sure, because they're looking for, they already had my friend, his name is Jeff Eisenman, they had him, but they wanted to pair him with a woman, and so they were like, oh well, Erin knows about a lot about games and 2K and all that stuff, and so um it just happened that way. They just needed someone. I was there at the right time, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then that was when I was like, oh, I really love this. I love hosting. I love talking in front of the camera, especially talking about video games. And then eventually I ran into my friend Brandon Brathwaite because of another mutual friend, Amanda Stevens. I was covering a fighting game tournament, and Brandon worked for a network where they had a gaming and esports show, and they're looking to find another co-host. So once again, the right time, the right people, and the right moment that I capitalized on. And then eventually I was hosting this gaming show, and it was something that kind of just went on, built on it for, layered up, and got to the point where I was hosting for Xbox. I was doing things for Nintendo. I was doing things for a lot of big gaming companies. And then eventually, I grew myself into being, one of the very few Afro Latinas in the executive position in gaming. So, and that was another thing, right time, right person, right opportunity. And I capitalized on it. Basically, the same pattern that I'm seeing with like everything that I've done in gaming. It's just been, I was prepared and an opportunity came about, and then I knocked it out of the park. And that's just been kind of the theme for my career in gaming. Like, how'd you get there? How'd you do this? How'd you do that? I'm like, right person, right time, and I just knocked it out of the park. Like, and it just seems to be sometimes that's the case. Just being ready, being prepared, and then when the door opens, you got to be ready to walk through it confidently.
Yeah, 100%. And like, soccer background, like me, like I say the same thing. It's like, you got to be trained, you got to be fit, because when you do get the minutes in the game, like, you got to be ready to go out there and perform, or else you're not going to get minutes again, right? Um, and I think that that's also, like, you say, kind of like, just happened, right place, right time. But I also believe in, like, I believe like there's like this positive energy and positive flow. Like, if we're consistently putting out positive energy, right? Like, I truly believe if we're consistently putting out positive energy, I think positive things happen, and then it's up to us to make the choice to either go right or go left. And what it sounds like is you see the opportunity and you grab it, and you're like, all right, let's run with it, right?
Yeah.
And there's probably been other opportunities that you're like, no, that's not for me, right? Because what you want to do is what makes you happy, which is
Yes.
super powerful, which is like, and your superpowers, your superpower being that when to go and grab the opportunity, and when to maybe let go of the opportunity, because as many opportunities you have to say yes to, you probably just have as many that you've said no to, right?
Yeah. That has absolutely been my superpower. I think the reason why I've been able to take on or let go of certain things is because I know where I want to go, and I have a plan, right? Like, so for example, in the gaming entertainment space, like I always find a way to connect dots, whether it's connecting gaming with entertainment, gaming with culture, or connecting talent with brands or platforms or things like that. And so because I have a clear, bigger picture, it makes it so much easier for me to have that superpower of picking the right moments, picking the right things, what makes sense for me, what doesn't. And then also, sometimes I pick things because I'm like, it's good money. It'll hold me off to this point. And then there's sometimes I'm like, I'm really passionate about this, even though it doesn't pay as much. I just love this and I want to do it. So I really, I know sometimes people, there's always like this conflict between like leading things with your heart and leading it with your head. And I'm a firm believer that you could do both. Like you could both have your heart lead you, but then have your mind, help you be selective and help you determine, right? You can have that passion that feels something, but you, at the end of the day, you have to think about, does this make sense? Is this fair for me? Like, is this going to help me in some capacity, or is it just something I want to do and it's fun and that's okay to do that too? So I really, I really believe that even though logic and rationality and using your brain and your mind is important, I think you still got to have that fuel and fire in your heart whenever you're making any decisions or whenever you are utilizing that superpower.
Yeah, and it's that thought process that like truly what I believe is like I can do something that I don't enjoy, but when it gets hard, like what's going to keep me doing it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like, but if I enjoy it on a daily basis, like when it gets hard, I'm still going to keep doing it because I'm driven, because I'm actually passionate about it from here. You know what I mean? Um, which is super cool. And like, and so okay, I'm going to get back on subject here because I could go off on a tangent for at least 45 minutes just on the whole different topic on esoterical talk. But you've built this esports organization. Like, what's your goal with it?
So, I mean, the goal for this company, obviously, like with any company, is to build it to the point of a high profitability and then sell it. Like that's just, I mean, to be very frank and honest. But I think another thing too is just, being a company that brings that intersectionality of gaming and culture and gaming entertainment. I think at the end of the day, like gaming is a lifestyle, and it should be treated as such. It's involved in every aspect of our life in some shape or form. And so that's one of the things that we wanted to do. And then, that's one of the things that our CEO, Greg Selko, is like really focused on, and our team's focused on, where it's like, hey, gamers aren't just kids. I mean, I think the average age of gamers is like in their 30s. So they're gamers of all ages. It's not just like a young groups thing. I mean, yes, they very much are a higher demographic of gamers, but video games have been around since the late 70s, early 80s. So there's
Yep.
so many people who still interact and engage with video games in some capacity. And so that's our philosophy, is like through every stage of life, there can be some interaction with gaming, right? Whether it is playing the video games, whether it's going to see the Super Mario movie, whether it's, sometimes people may be VIP in a club and they want a game there, like they just want to chill. So it's just, showing that gaming can be utilized and branded and be a business in a multitudes of way, and not just in the way that we commonly see it. So that's like one of our biggest goals at XSET.
I love that. I love that. And you said something in the beginning there that I think is like super powerful for anybody that's building a business or starting a business or has an idea of a business. You said it's build to sell, like any business, but I think a lot of people don't realize that difference.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the difference between being self-employed and a business owner, right? Like you can
Yeah.
create a job for yourself or you can create a business that will run itself and then eventually be able to sell and profit from, right? Like, so I think that's super powerful. And like now, like with that being said, this thought process of build to sell, did you, is that something that you learned from a mentor? Is that something that you like, how did you even think about building a business that way versus just building a career for yourself?
Yeah. I think Well, so there's like several companies that I've invested in or I'm part of the ownership group for, and like every single company is different. Like some want to be, I mean, whether they want to say it or not, I mean, almost every single one of them is gonna want to sell at some point.
Yeah,
Like I think there's some people that are a little more comfortable saying it than others. But I think that ultimately with like this
that's so
business,
true.
I think with this business, it's like I mean, for me personally, like even though that is a goal, I think the biggest thing for me personally is just, having it be an impact and utilizing it as a vehicle for success, especially, considering that even though everyone games, the opportunities are not a level playing field in the gaming space. And so, that kind of contributes to some of the projects and initiatives that I work with a team on internally. I mean, yeah, there's like the cool stuff where you do like the gaming stuff with celebs and blah, blah, blah. But then, a lot of the stuff that I do is very educational and providing skills and information and resources for upcoming creators and even creators of color or from low income areas, because now everyone has the ability to create something for themselves because of the access, through the internet, access through having a cell phone to film and so forth. So that for me, that the most important thing is the impact of how it helps others and utilizing gaming as a vehicle for success. But
I love
also
that.
I do understand too, it's a business. Like I truly believe even like a business can be about profit and revenue, and it can also be about impact. Too often, I think sometimes companies think it's separated, but it's not. And when I talk to because I've consulted with some of the video game publishers and other companies, and I always tell them, like, especially when we talk about diversity and inclusion, and I always tell them, all right, from a personal front, it's a good thing to do because you're creating opportunities for other people. But if you're just a business person and, maybe your moral compass is off a little bit, the other benefit of it is there are companies that focus on DE&I and they see a 20% increase in revenue and profit. So it's also good business. So, as someone who, this may be something I'm passionate about. I understand that other people aren't, but that's why I have that balance of something that is um and intangible, and something that I am that from a personal front I'm very passionate about. But then also I understand the business front and that companies need to make money, companies at some point need to sell, like all these different things. So I've learned how to make that balance and be able to communicate both effectively together in a manner that allows me to get some of the projects I need to get done and to develop some of the relationships that I have too.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of relationships, I think, we had mentioned one of your superpowers is knowing when to say yes and knowing when to say no. But I think another one, like, that we probably skipped over a little bit was that it's relationships. Like, you've mentioned different names throughout this podcast, and they're all relationships that were integral to your success that you're having. So how does somebody cultivate those relationships in a way that eventually they gain success from? It's a loaded question.
Uh no, it's fine. I mean, the easiest answer I could say is like I've just always stayed true to myself. I think, like, you said this earlier, when you put out good energy and when you're kind, good things come back to you. And I think kindness is something that is so underestimated, especially when it comes to business, because like I think like we're all, the whole like you got to be a shark, you got to be a shark. I am a firm believer that you can be kind and you can be firm too. Like you don't have to be a jerk, to be really good at
Yeah.
business. You don't. And if anything, you get more with honey than anything else. So I've always been someone that's just treated people with respect. I didn't care whether you were the CEO or you were the janitor. I treated everyone the same. I was never someone who like would see someone who is in a higher position and, just give them all the attention and then see someone else and I didn't know them. I'm like, psh. I was never that kind of person. I
Yeah.
always talked to everyone. I always built relationships because, I was very lucky to have I had my mom, my stepdad, and my dad. They all worked at Merrill Lynch. Like my mom was a VP in fintech at Merrill Lynch. So my
Wow.
mom taught me early the importance of relationship building and business. And she used to always tell me that you never know who is who and where people are going to end up. You may meet someone who is the mailman today, and then they may end up being the CEO 10 years from now. You don't know. And people may not always remember what you say, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And so that's why, I always treated people with a like same level of respect they give me, kindness. And then I never like whenever I connect with people, I never ask for things. I just genuinely wanted to get to know them. And I would spend like the first 3 months just talking to them. And then a skill set, well, it's not even a skill set. This is something that I've learned that has been so fruitful is whenever I meet these people, I always ask them, what can I do for you? I don't ask them what they can do for me. And especially like the first like 4 months, 4 or 5 months, I don't ask them for anything. I'm like, hey, what can I do for you? Because so many times these people are having people go to them asking for things, like wanting to just take. And they usually will always remember someone who just goes to them and says, how can I help you? Because you're always doing stuff for other people. How can I help you? And that has helped me to stand out a lot. To the point now where those people are always like, Erin, what can we do for you? And I'm like, I don't know. I'll let you know. Like, and I'm always the kind of person where I'm like, I want to
Let me put
figure it out
that favor
myself.
in my pocket over here.
Yeah, but I'm so bad too. I'm always like, only recently I started to learn, hey, it's okay to ask for help for certain things. I used to
Yeah.
be like, I can figure out myself. Um, but yeah,
I've dealt with that a lot in my life, like because I think it naturally happens when you are a high performing individual, used to problem solving, used to doing it all on your own, where you're like boom, 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 and then like a problem comes and it's like I can ask this, but like I could figure it out. But like it's also very important to have. I had I led a mastermind and ended up helping me more than it probably helped everybody else. But I led a mastermind recently and it was and we had this conversation about this exact topic, right? And about asking other people for help when we need it, right? And what I learned for me that changed a lot for me was I created a quote unquote board of directors of Cyrus, where these are the people that I trust that I can always call and lean on and ask for advice for anything, right? Those are like my mentors, my closest, like five closest people that like I'm gonna call for any business advice, any personal advice, anything, like board of directors of Cyrus, right? And that was so game changer for me because it also relieved like so much pressure off of like my own self to try and figure it all out. You know what I mean? Like it was game changer. So like I 100% relate to everything you just said, as far as building the relationships and how to build the relationships, and especially on the fact that like you got to learn to also ask for yourself. It's so important. Um, you drop probably some of the most valuable information that somebody could drop as far as networking goes, as far as getting to know people. Um, and I asked you that question because I genuinely felt like you were going to answer the way that I thought you were going to, because I can tell from your personality, like it really is about giving first. And I truly feel the same way in life. Like, and it's this abundance mindset. It's this thought process where like genuinely, like when I meet somebody, I don't care who they are, who you are, or what you do, like let's connect. And if there's good vibes and things, you know, things will work together. Like you'll be hanging out with somebody and be like, oh, I'm working on this part. They're like, wait a second, I'm doing the same thing. And you're like, wait a second, why don't we do it together? Like, what are we doing? Because there's good vibes and there's connectivity. And it's so important to when you're going to meet people to do exactly what you said to do. Like go into it, no thought process of what am I going to get from you, but how can I help you? And that's going to get you so much further. That's so, so good. It's like gold that you dropped. I love that. Um, Now you're crushing it in all these different spaces. What's next?
Hmm. Um, it's it's interesting because I think for me, I look at what I've accomplished and I'm like, this is amazing. I'm so happy I accomplished that. And then how what I do is like every end of the year, and it's kind of a process I'm going through now. It's okay, I'm here. What is the next step? What does our next step look like? Who do I need on my team? Do I need to make changes on my team? Do I need to make changes in terms of prioritization? I really spend the time thinking about what I need to do. And the next step would just be like taking things further. I want to host on bigger programs, bigger shows, even on TV. I want to invest more, really build my IP that I have called Real Gems, which is not only like a podcast and show where I talk to creators about like their pivots and their transitions, but I want to build that out into just like an IP that I can create more opportunities with. And so, that is those are some of the next goals and next steps that I have. But before I have that written down, but before I even get to that point, I realize, and this is something that I hope more people realize, you are only as strong as your team. And so I have to evaluate and see currently who's on my team. Do I need to add more people? Do I need to change anyone? Do I need to change what their priorities are when it comes to working with me? And so I spend a lot of time doing that at the end of the year, kind of evaluating what's gone well, what hasn't, how can we fix the things that didn't really perform well or didn't, happen the way they were supposed to happen, so that next year we learn from the successes and then we learn from the failures. I'm someone who's very comfortable with like, okay, something dropped the ball, this didn't happen, this didn't work. Why is it? And sometimes it has nothing to do with my abilities. And sometimes it has to do with systems and processes or communication or, you know, um, reprioritizing, various different things. So I really spend the time just like figuring that out. And then as I have the big picture, I start formulating what does the next 30 days look like? What does the next 60 days, 90 days, 3 months, 6 months, year. So I build it out like that to lead it to the overarching goal that I have.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Now, again, going all the way back to I think like core principle of like what's gotten you to where you're at, other than like, pouring positive energy and sharing and having this abundance mindset, it's the fact that you've been okay with trying new things and never felt the pressure of I have to do this or I have to do that. Um, so what advice can you give to somebody that one piece of advice you could give to somebody that might be struggling with, the pressure of not trying something new, or the pressure of the fear of failing if you do try something new?
Failing's part of the journey. I always tell people the more that you embrace it, the less it's gonna hurt you. Like you just gotta accept the fact that failure is part of the success journey. Like I don't know any all the people that I know that are super successful, I don't know one person who hasn't failed in some way. And you can't, failure is, and sometimes things that fail, it may not have anything to do with you. Like some things are just completely out of your control. You can't worry about it. You can only worry about what you can control. And so I always tell people who are maybe afraid of failing or, maybe afraid of trying is like, I always say, like, what's the worst thing that could happen? Someone says no, it didn't work. Okay. You just pick up the pieces, you learn what didn't work, and then try it again, or take a pivot, or go a different direction. Like, the more energy you spend, being sad and not doing anything, you're wasting your potential. And so I always say, and another thing too is if you're already at the bottom, there's only up from here. So like, what is there to be afraid of? Like if it didn't work, well, guess what? You're still in the same spot you were when you didn't start. So there's only an upside from there. And so,
Yeah.
I always try to let people know, like, you're not alone in failing. Like every single successful person, when they first tried what they're great at, they were not great at it. LeBron did not just
Yep.
pick up a basketball and was like amazing. Derek Jeter didn't just pick up a bat and was amazing. Like, no, it took time, it took practice, it took learning and failing. That's life.
Yep.
So they got to just be okay with that and understand it's part of the process.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing so many gems today. Thank you for being on the podcast today. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
They want to connect with me, they can find me at Erin A. Simon, ERIN, the letter A, SIM as in mother, ON as in Nancy, like Simon says, on all social media platforms. Or you can just look up Erin Ashley Simon, and I'm sure you'll be able to find my socials and stuff from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you again. I appreciate you and thank you for sharing.
Thank you as well. I really appreciate it as well.